circles. Thank you for tuning to the channel. Thank you to all our new subscribers. Hope you're having a wonderful Saturday morning. There's plenty to talk about today, so bear with me when I say we will be doing two different live broadcasts for the weekend. But we're going to start with a brief one, and it has nothing to do with the Premier League. It has nothing to do with the FA Cup. But because of what it means for what's to come in the mid of the week, next week, in the UEFA Champions League, I thought we should have a discussion about it. So indulge me as I test our audio to get us underway for today's first broadcast. So yeah, bear with me as we do this, because the last thing we want to do is getting it wrong, because we've burnt our fingers a couple of times when it comes to these things of where we are communicating and you guys are unable to listen to us. But yes, anyways, today in a very interesting turn of events, possibly like never seen before on the Footballtribeug channel, we are taking a flight to the French Ligue 1, because there are some interesting things that did happen on Friday night that's in the French Ligue 1, and why they are important to us, or not just for this channel, but for the context of football and what's to come in the UEFA Champions League. For those of you that do follow the channel adherently, who I'm very grateful to, by the way, yesterday we did publish our 29 minutes preview of that game that's to come on Tuesday night in the UEFA Champions League between Arsenal and PSG. Now, it goes without saying that we did not exhaust everything that there was to talk about, because we didn't want to make it so lengthy. Maybe there is a few pointers here and there that we may have missed, or that you think we should talk about. Endeavor to leave them down in the comment section. I think I did see Mr. Okuyo. I think, is it Mr. Okuyo or something? Yes, I think Mr. Okuyo did leave us a comment saying that PSG had rested their players in their game versus Nice, which is what we are here to speak about. Well, you couldn't be more wrong, sir, because PSG fielded, I think, arguably 10 out of their best 11 players on the day. So, anyways, for those of you that are just joining the broadcast, welcome to the Footballtribeug channel. Robert Kesakos is your usual suspect. Like I said, PSG fielded their best 11. I can see Kasim Afrikali. Thank you so much for tuning to the broadcast, and thank you for your comment. If you're new here, kindly remember to subscribe and support my channel so that we can continue to grow. So, as saying, PSG did field, I think, arguably their best 11, bar maybe one change, because they did have Gianluigi Donnarumma in that starting 11. They did have Achraf Hakimi, William Pacho, then Nuno Mendes. You had the players like João Neves. You had players like Fabian Ruiz. You had players like Vitinha in that midfield. You had Ousmane Dembele start that game. You had Kivicha Kvaratskhelia. I mean, that's as good as a starting 11 does come from a PSG side on a given day. But they did lose their unbeaten one of the season, as far as the French League 1 is concerned, to Nice, when they lost by 3-1 on Friday night. Now, here's the context of things. Of course, PSG were pursuing this record to become the first French team that goes a whole season unbeaten, pretty much to try and replicate what Bayer Leverkusen did last season in the German Bundesliga, or what Arsenal were able to do back in 2003-2004 season. So that's what we were trying to replicate, to go an entire season unbeaten. Unfortunately, they had only walked that mile. I think more than 70%, sorry, more than 75%, because they had played 30 games out of 34 of the league season, and it is on match day 31 that they unfortunately lost that, potential record. And as the manager in Luis Enrique did come out to acknowledge that it was one of the records that they had hoped to achieve. But that's the nature of football. Sometimes you lose. Now, the manner in which they lost is kind of similar to what I talked about in the aftermath of Arsenal's 2-0 draw with Crystal Palace. That sometimes you can dominate possession and still have nothing to show for it. And that's pretty much what happened. Guys, if you're on the broadcast, kindly leave me a like, kindly leave me a comment. But thank you for tuning in. So, like I said, you can have a very good game in terms of possession, but the scoreline, the moments are not yours. And that's pretty much what happened, because PSG had as much as, I think, 76% of ball possession, but that did not count to so much. They had as many as 30 shots on goal, but still fell short on winning this game or even picking a point, because they did come in this particular game on the back of a 1-1 draw against Nantes or Nantes, as some of you prefer to pronounce it, but it's Nantes. That was on Tuesday night. Okay, so in very spectacular fashion, they had hoped maybe they get to win this game versus Nice. By the time of the fixture, of course, PSG had already been crowned champions, having clinched the title, the League One title, for the 4th consecutive season at the start of this month. It goes without saying that last season they clinched the French Ligue 1 title with a tally of 76 points, and that was in Luis Enrique's debut season, having been announced as their new manager in July 2023 when he took over the reins at the club. This Metex edits says, bro, assalamu alaikum, wa alaikum salam, wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you so much for the comments there and for joining the broadcast. Kindly leave me a like if you're new here, and perhaps consider subscribing as well. So, in his debut season, they amassed a tally of 76 points. That was enough to help them clinch the title. Now, this season, they had already surpassed that very, a point tally that helped them win that title, because they are at a tally of 78 points, 2 better than they were last season. So that was quite incredible of them that they've already achieved. But the biggest goal was to achieve that objective of going an entire season unbeaten. And also, the other team that attempted to complete that was Nice, I think. Yes, Nice themselves, when they were winning the 1994-1995 French League 1 title. They went 32 games unbeaten and lost before losing. So they unfortunately could not lose, could not finish the entire campaign unbeaten. And that's really what befell PSG on the night. It was Morgan Sanson that opened the scoring there for the visitors in Nice at Parc de France, but near the half-time mark, Fabian Ruiz did restore PSG, but just 22 seconds upon restart in the second half, again, Morgan Sanson did score to make that game 2-1 to, give the visitors the advantage. And then that 3-1 victory was completed by Yusuf Ndaishimwe. Now, Yusuf Ndaishimwe is a Burundian international. For those of you that are familiar with the geographics of Africa and East Africa to be in particular, you will know that Burundi is somewhere is somewhere in the corners of East Africa. That's south of the Republic of Rwanda, and I think northeast. Is it northeast? Yes, northeast of Uganda, somewhere there in between. But of course, they do border Rwanda and Tanzania in that mix. So that's where Yusuf Ndaishimwe does come from. But he is the one that did score that goal to make it a 3-1 on the night, as Nice completed that 3-1 victory over Paris Saint-Germain. That was in the 70th minute. But like I said, PSG dominated the game. The result itself does not paint the perfect picture of what was on the pitch. But I thought it's worth talking about. One, because they lost the unbeaten one after 30 league games, so it was match day 31 for them. They lost that unbeaten one record, and another record they lost. I think they had last lost to French opposition back in May last year. That is against Toulouse, when they lost by 3-1. So they were unbeaten in 41 games against French opposition, I think, across all competitions. So clearly, this also tells you further of how dominant PSG has been in French football in recent times. So with that result, with that victory, Nice did move fourth on the French League One table with 54 points, level with a third place AC Monaco, and just a point behind a second place that is Olympique Marseille. Yeah, but like I said, PSG have already clinched the title, so it is not right. When you see the result in itself, do not think that Luis Enrique rested all his players in anticipation or to prepare them for that game against Arsenal on Tuesday next week. That was not the case. Really, he fielded his best team, arguably, and he had all his stars out there. Of course, Marquinhos was in that starting 11, and Desire Doué did start that game. So clearly, I mean, this is PSG's A team. Of course, it goes without saying that it has taken a bit of time for Luis Enrique to get his perfect team. For some of the players that he signed, include Ivica Kvaratskhelia, who they got in January from Napoli. Of course, last summer they got João Neves, a player that had been linked with the move to Arsenal, to Chelsea, and other big clubs. I think even Bayern Munich were one of those teams that were interested in the youngster because he was proving to be very, very good there from, I think, Benfica at the time. So he does have his team, and it's gotten into his style more and more as they progressed on. And the reason as why this particular result is important for me in relation to that game that they do have against Arsenal next week in midweek on Tuesday is because I get the feeling that mentally the team or the players had all their thoughts on that game that is upcoming against Arsenal pretty much in similar fashion in a way in which Arsenal played that game against Crystal Palace that ended in a 2-2 draw. You could see that Arsenal, while they dominated possession, overall they were not at their best. They made so many mistakes. A lot of players were below average. Raheem Sterling, David Raya, William Saliba, of course, never mind that he did perform well against Edin Ketia, but the manner in which he concedes possession to Joan Felipe Mateta for him to score that equalizer, Martin Odegaard wasn't at his best. I mean, all Arsenal players really, really did not bring their A game on the day. And it sort of painted the picture that, again, psychologically, maybe they had their focus or their thoughts on that game that will be coming against PSG in the last four of the UEFA Champions League. So, in quite similar fashion, even when PSG dominated possession in this particular one and had as many as 30 shots on goal, you get the feeling that mentally in their space, they are looking forward to that game. That's what really preoccupied their minds, regardless of what the manager had to say about yesterday's game. Now, speaking of that game, like I said, on the channel, we did publish our preview for that Arsenal versus, PSG fixture. But I do think, regardless of that result versus this, maybe I would want to think that Arsenal scouts or technical people must have been watching that game from A to Z to see where PSG are vulnerable, to see what weaknesses can they exploit versus PSG. Because when you look at that PSG team versus Arsenal, I get the feeling that technically PSG is a better team, than Arsenal. We all know that games are won in the midfield, that when you win that midfield battle, you have higher chances of winning the entire game. And you get the feeling that that midfield of Fabian Ruiz, Vitinha, and João Neves is more technically gifted as compared to Arsenal's midfield, especially bearing in mind the absence of Thomas Partey through that suspension that he will be serving for the first leg. So, which leaves Arsenal with Declan Rice, Martin Odegaard, and maybe Mikel Merino, maybe Luis Kelly, maybe Leandro Trossard, maybe Alexander Zinchenko, maybe a Carafiori, maybe Ethan Nwaneri, whoever Mikel Arteta chooses to complete that midfield. Of course, bearing in mind that Declan Rice and Martin Odegaard are guaranteed starters should they be fully fit by any injury, upsets between now and match day. That's on Tuesday, 29th. So that third arm that completes the midfield of three? Is it Miles Lewis Kelly? Is it Alexander Zinchenko? Is it Mikel Merino? Whoever it is that will be chosen for Mikel Arteta, you get the feeling that PSG are more technically gifted in that space. But maybe the advantage for Arsenal is that they will look to their, physical prowess, because physically they are a much better team as compared to PSG. When it comes to power and that burst of surge of energy, you get the feeling Arsenal have the edge there when you look at Declan Rice. Now, again, the disadvantage for Arsenal is that when you have Declan Rice playing at the base of that midfield as a deep lying midfielder or the number 6, you sort of miss out on his runs that he does make in as a left 8. The box-to-box kind of midfield play that he offers Arsenal, the driving forward with a lot of power, a lot of speed, and that kind of thing, with a long range pass every once in a while. Now, again, that of course is the case because they are also without Jorginho, who suffered an injury, again a chest injury in their 1-1 goal against Brentford about a fortnight ago. So that, when you put all that in contention, you get the feeling that PSG do have an advantage in that midfield cohort. When it comes to other areas where you think the competition will be, we'll have small battles of Bukayo Saka versus who? Versus Achraf Hakimi. You'll have Gabriel Martinelli versus Bukayo Saka versus Nuno Mendes, and Achraf Hakimi versus Gabriel Martinelli. Those battles, who gets the better of who, and then you do have Yuri and Timber up against Kivicha Kvaratskhelia. You do have a Miles Lewis Kelly or Kieran Tierney or Alexander Zinchenko, whoever is put at left back, having to face Desire Doe there. So again, those battles, who wins those battles? Because if Miles Lewis Kelly is beaten, it will cause Arsenal problems. If Kivicha Kvaratskhelia can beat Timber, it will cause Arsenal problems. And the reverse is true for Bukayo Saka or Nuno Mendes or Gabriel Martinelli versus Achraf Hakimi. So in that whole context of things, you do get the feeling that it's going to be a very interesting game to watch technically and tactically. Of course, both managers in Luis Enrique are very technically gifted. These are two managers with Mikel Arteta who really study the opponent, study the game, and try to adapt. Although coming into that first fixture, when Arsenal beat up against PSG in the group stages at the table level, of course, PSG had not yet gelled. Luis Enrique was still over-rotating his team. He had not really zeroed down to, a very solid starting 11. Kivicha Kvaratskhelia was not in that team, and that kind of thing. But he now has a more consistent 11. So he said that they have not studied, set pieces and tried to adapt to them. Now, the advantage for Arsenal is that they do have that set piece play strength. When it comes to corners, they really attack those balls really well, although they miss their biggest weapon when it comes to corners, and that's Gabriel Magalhaes, because he's one of those defenders that usually scores off set pieces. And then, of course, PSG themselves do not defend set pieces really well, and we saw that in the third goal they conceded against Aston Villa at Villa Park, when Marcus Rashford makes that run into the box and plays in Ezri Konsa, who scores to make it 3-2 at the time. Then the goalkeeper in Gianluigi Donnarumma is also not very good when it comes to set pieces, in terms of coming out and collecting that ball or patching it away, pretty much like David Raya is good at it in that kind of sense. So you get the feeling that Arsenal also have an advantage there. But so now, again, Arsenal do struggle against teams that do play a very low block. We've seen that in the Premier League when they play teams like Everton, when they play teams like Nottingham Forest, when they play teams like Newcastle, when they play teams like West Ham, because they did lose to West Ham at home by goal to nil. Teams that will play with a low block and sort of let Arsenal have majority of the ball and then try to to see if they can crack them open, of course, to no fruition. So there's that. Does that give PSG a tactical shift in how they approach this Arsenal game? Unfortunately, I do not think that Luis Enrique is the type of manager who, even when he adjusts his tactics, could come to the Emirates Stadium and choose to play a low block. I do not think they do have the players that have the discipline to play that kind of game. It's not to say that they cannot implement it, but I do not think they can implement it to the perfection of the likes of Brentford, the likes of Newcastle, the likes of Everton, of how they've done it in recent times versus Arsenal. So maybe does that mean it's good for Arsenal or not? Again, we wait to see what tactics both managers do implement. When it comes to experience, like we spoke about yesterday, again, please go watch that video. It's about 29 minutes, and I guarantee you it will be worth your time. We talk about most of these things, many of these things. Of course, where Arsenal have the advantage, what the concerns will be, and that kind of thing. But I thought I should perhaps note that when it comes to beating the high press, PSG are really good. They did that against Aston Villa. They beat the press, and I think for their second goal, within about 4 passes, they had managed to score through Nuno Mendes, Ousmane Dembele providing the assist for that one. So Arsenal will have to be worried of that, and they ought to prepare for that. So overall, you get the feeling that PSG have an upper hand in this game, given how they've gone this season and progressed, especially in the UEFA Champions League, and then got things together at home and that kind of thing. So I do get the feeling that they have an edge over Arsenal tactically. But when it comes to physical prowess, you get the feeling that Arsenal are better there. But the absence of Jorginho, who would have played as a number 6 in the absence of Thomas Partey, his absence through injury really puts Arsenal at a very big disadvantage, because they lose that Declan Rice threat when he does play as a number 8. We really saw what he did versus Real Madrid, driving forward, driving back, leading the set piece plays, for which he did score 2 free kicks, as we all remember, and that kind of thing. So when you have him as your holding midfielder, it sort of limits him, because he has to play more conservatively, and to have to worry that there's nobody in that position to hold foot. And then it also begs the question, can they play an interchangeably role? For example, if you were to play with Mikel Merino, can they play an interchangeably role where Declan Rice says, when I move forward, please stay behind? Of course, if he does play that role with Miles Lewis-Kelly, it will be really hard to ask for Miles Lewis-Kelly to play the role of staying behind, and you have Declan Rice advancing forward. But anyway, those are all my thoughts. Those are some of the things that I really wanted to discuss. But I thought that loss for PSG versus Nice was quite crucial for us to discuss here on the channel, in context to what's to come in the UEFA Champions League and much more. I do think that PSG are going to prove to be a very different challenge from what Arsenal have faced all throughout this season so far. They're going to be very much different from what Arsenal had to face in Real Madrid, in what they had to face with PSV at the round of 16, what they had to face with Inter Milan at the group stages, with clubs like Dinamo Zagreb, with clubs like Shakhtar Donetsk, with PSG themselves, because this PSG is quite different from the one they faced in that game at the MS Stadium during the group stage level or the league format level. But I thought those things shouldn't go without being mentioned in the context of what's to come. So anyways, we will be doing another broadcast possibly at around 11 a.m. That's in about an hour's time, possibly at 11:15. So do join me. We're going for the weekend preview of the Premier League. There's an early kickoff between Chelsea and Everton. We will be discussing a bit of that. But more importantly, our biggest talking point will be between Liverpool and Tottenham Hotspurs. Less of the tactics, but more of the Premier League title, because Liverpool really have a chance to clinch that Premier League title this weekend. And of course, in Arne Slot's debut season, perhaps the last trophy that Trent Alexander-Arnold gets to win for Liverpool before he moves on to join Real Madrid, because it looks like the writing is on the wall that he's going to join. Of course, Virgil van Dijk wins another title, could win another title for Liverpool as captain, and that kind of thing. Of course, I think would it be his first as captain? Not really. It wouldn't be his first, but suddenly his biggest, because the other Champions League and the league title that they won, that was winning the Champions League in 2019 and winning the league in 2020. That's with Jordan Henderson as the captain of Liverpool at the time. And things to do with that. Then Manchester United have a date with AFC Bournemouth, a very tricky opponent there for Manchester United, with the way things have been going this season. So there's going to be a bit of plenty for us to discuss, and not to mention the FA Cup semi-finals that do come underway this weekend at Wembley Stadium. So for now, allow me to close this chapter at least, and let's link up in an hour's time or slightly thereabout. Just turn on your notifications and you'll be let know once we go live, and we'll be coming to you live to discuss all the weekend action that's to come your way in the Premier League and the FA Cup, and anything else that may fall in line during that period. Otherwise, allow me to close it here and wish you a wonderful rest of the weekend. Bye-bye for now. Stay blessed.